I like to make sure you're ready too, Lindsay. Okay, we'll do it. Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone. I want to call the meeting of the Keystone Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Today is September 18th and it's 5:30. And as always, thank you everybody for being here. And if we could now have Gabby, please call the roll.
A little delayed, but we do have sounds.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna do the roll call.
Sure.
Commissioner Heidi,
Present.
Commissioner Jacobson,
Present.
Commissioner Coe,
Online.
He's on.
His name is online.
Muted perhaps? No,
David.
it's not muted. Oh, there it goes. Now it's muted.
David, are you able to unmute?
Oh, okay.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We're just calling the roll.
Okay.
Commissioner Mallon,
Present.
Commissioner Rob,
Here.
Commissioner Tim,
Here.
Chair Wojtek,
Here.
alternate Diane Beasley.
Here.
There are 8 members present.
Super, thank you. So we've got a quorum. Our first order of business, of course, is to approve the consent agenda. The agenda consists of minutes from last meeting, our August meeting. And then we have 3 topics for tonight: the ordinance regarding the use of natural medicine, the comprehensive plan engagement report, and the comprehensive plan draft outline. Are there any corrections or items that anyone wants added or removed to the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as is?
Motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay.
Just on the record, I did hear Diane was acknowledged being an alternate. Who's our other alternate? Okay, thank you.
I don't think it's on my name.
You don't vote, but you can talk.
Okay, that's what I. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, there's 9 members present. I'm so sorry. This must have been an old one that I got. I'm terribly sorry about it.
Just, for the record. So again, just a small reminder. You can certainly comment as much as you would like for the items there tonight, but where it takes a vote, you don't vote. Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to general business. And as I said, we've got three substantive things to talk about today, but I think we should start with the ordinance 2025-016, regulating the use of natural medicine. And with this, I'm assuming I'm turning it over to Jennifer. Is that good? Yes, I think I see Jennifer.
Jennifer, you should have access to present now.
Okay, I can get it now. Yes, thank you. Well, good evening, members of the Planning Commission. It looks like it's a beautiful day there.
It is.
Nice and sunny.
It really is.
Well, I wish I was there instead of my office in Centennial, but it'll have to suffice. Okay, so what you have before you is a draft ordinance, essentially putting in place an amendment to the town's land use code. And the amendments are related to natural medicine uses. This includes any cultivation facilities, healing centers, product manufacturers, and testing facilities. And the goal here is to ensure that the town has responsible operations of these different uses while aligning with the state law requirement that municipalities allow these uses within their jurisdictions. So a little bit of background on Natural Medicine Health Act. In 2022, the Colorado voters approved the Natural Medicine Health Act. And essentially what that did was it decriminalized psilocybin and authorized the use in certain manners. It does not allow for the individual retail sale of psilocybin. The state has also implemented pretty stringent licensing and oversight requirements, and these regulations are put in place by the Department of Revenue and DORA. As I mentioned, local governments cannot ban these businesses, but you can regulate time, place, and manner. Keystone has put in place a moratorium. That moratorium is in place until February 1 of 2026. And the reason that we did that is to really give some time to allow consideration of these regulations. There have not been many people who have obtained licenses to operate these uses from the state. So it's not that individuals are contacting Keystone to ask to be able to operate these businesses. So what the ordinance does is essentially prescribes where these uses would be allowed, and that is in the B1 business zone, highway business zone district. There was an attachment to the staff report which identified that area. There are separation requirements, 1,000 feet from schools and child care facilities, 50 feet from residential properties. In addition, in the ordinance, there are operational restrictions. The uses may only be operated in fully enclosed buildings. Hours would be limited to 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week. There's strict odor, light, and noise controls. Any outdoor operations would be prohibited. And then there are some prescribed security standards. So this ordinance that you have before you is really pretty consistent with what we have seen in other jurisdictions in Summit County, and also pretty consistent with other jurisdictions in Colorado. So that's the overview of what you have before you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions. One thing that I do want to point out before questions is that your role as a planning and zoning commission here is really to review the ordinance and to recommend or not recommend to town council. So once you make that decision, then town council will ultimately decide whether to approve the ordinance.
Jennifer, we could also recommend to approve it with some changes too, though, right?
You
That's
could,
like-
yes.
Yeah, okay.
What you might want to do there would be, well, we could do it that way, or if there are more changes, we could come back and bring a new draft to you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, like we've done that before. Okay, super. Thank you. Well, I know people have questions for you, so I'll just start with Steve.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer. Steve Jacobson. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. So I have a lot of questions, but I'm kind of going to condense them to just a few. As I read through the materials, it said that under manner, a lot of municipalities have implemented other regulations, a little bit more security provisions, things about not putting anything in the disposal that could be any part of the product that was being used, and others. I didn't quite see all of those provisions, which I think would be good, my personal opinion, but I didn't see all of those within the document as written. So when you put manner in, you're just giving us examples of other things we could look at?
Yes, those are some examples of things that other municipalities have done.
And those aren't necessarily all of them in the document we're looking at today, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So Chairman, one of the things
Yeah.
I would suggest is having us all look at the additional, any additional regulations we think make sense.
Yeah, let me ask you, Jennifer, along those lines, is there a reason why there was something that you didn't put in the draft ordinance that you saw other people do, other jurisdictions doing?
Well, so, I mean, some of these things, other jurisdictions may have put in place licensing requirements. We did not add a licensing requirement. Having these types of additional regulations related to the manner of operations might be difficult to enforce. And this is an area where you might ask Lindsay his thoughts on this. But if you're really looking at how the business operates and regulating those aspects of, day-to-day operations, those would be a little bit challenging to enforce. Essentially, you would need to know that somebody is not operating in that manner, and then you would have a violation of your land use code. And that type of violation under the land use code is not necessarily what you're looking at using your code for is the operations of the business. Those types of regulations are better suited towards licensing. If you have a license, then you can revoke the license.
Okay.
So I hear what you're saying, but I would not, I've been where in other businesses where we have controlled the filtration coming out of manufacturing. So why would that be an issue? Or you need to have so many foot candles per your parking lot. Entrances need to be lit.
Yeah.
It needs to be in a building, not a trailer. That's not telling them how to run their business. It's more related to the facility and how the facilities is built and looked at, and in some ways, security as well. I'm not connecting it the way you were, but you're the lawyer, I'm not. But I think those are more zoning related issues and not operation issues, really.
I think those are in the ordinance.
Are they all in? I didn't see them all.
The lighting and the trash and there were, a lot of those things are in the draft ordinance.
But what about the trailer piece of?
Actually, for the
I didn't see
building,
it.
I did have a question along, that in the ordinance, Jennifer, it says that there's the word principal building. I noticed that term being used, and then I got from the background that other jurisdictions wanted to make sure it's not in a tent or something. I'm wondering if instead of saying principal building, we could say what that means, or if that's a term that's used in other contexts. Could we define it, or instead of saying principal building, say a hard-sided roofed building?
Or does the current zoning of B1 cover that anyway?
It does.
That's what I was saying.
Okay,
So I think
okay.
we're all right.
Yeah.
If I may.
Okay, okay.
Where it is not directly addressed, these questions are addressed elsewhere in the land use and development code. B1 is an older zoning designation. But with that being said, there are other parts of the land use and development code currently in chapter 3 that cover aesthetics. Not great, but certainly dictate the type of structure you're allowed to use.
Okay, and is that where the word principal building comes
I don't
from?
know, well, I don't know, Jennifer, where that came from, to be honest.
Yeah, it says principal building, that was just the word.
That would mean where the operation has actually occurred.
But that could be a permanent trailer and put a skirt around
Yeah,
it.
and you wouldn't be able to do that. There
For
are
the zoning.
sufficient, correct.
Okay.
So the zoning covers
Only
it.
allowed that type of structure, quite frankly, with construction-oriented activities and a couple other, but no,
Okay.
not for a retail business. Jennifer, let me ask you a quick question. As part of, we're not going to do licensing, at least we haven't gotten that direction thus far, but won't the operator need to get a state license?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and part of that, my understanding is, security is addressed. And a lot of the nuisance related and, the things that we aren't directly, regulating in the ordinance will be covered by the state as part of getting their license, is my understanding.
that's correct. I mean, these businesses are heavily regulated under the state rules. And those were outlined in the staff report, starting at page 2. I identified, categories of those regulations, but 2 through really page 5 is a very high level overview of those regulations. So that was another primary reason for not drilling in too deeply in terms of the manner in which the business is operated.
Peter?
A general question, it kind of goes both to Jennifer and to Lindsay. We're choosing B1, I understand why, but when I look at the specifics of what B1 actually consists of, and tell me if any of these are wrong, because Tenderfoot Lodge is a residence, therefore and because of the 50-foot rule, that eliminates that one as being an option. Because Oro Grande is also a lodge / residence, by definition, that excludes that one. Oh gosh, here we go. Narrow strip along north side of Highway 6 doesn't have enough setbacks, therefore can't build anything, therefore can't put a building on it, therefore it cannot be one. Gulp. Snake River Village condos, gateway condos on that eastern side, middle half are all residents. Therefore, you can't put it in that part of that parcel. The only one that seems even moderately available would be the Snake River Saloon / Christie Sports region of that one parcel.
I concur.
And that's what I wanted to make sure if I read that
The
correctly.
short answer is, your analysis is indeed
Okay,
pretty correct.
here comes the fun
But
part.
looking at it currently as it is now, who's to say?
Couldn't change it in the future. Just on,
Right.
what it boils down to is 2 basic questions. The other one that's a little trickier is that our neighbor, who is not in the town of Keystone, did have a childcare unit in the Mountain House area. And that is right about 1,000 feet away from the last of the list. Therefore, Snake River Saloon, Christie Sports area might also be excluded because of that rule. And the question kind of becomes to Jennifer, is if every one of these have a condition that excludes it, do we get into trouble for saying using B1? Because none of them apply. Although, as Lindsay just said, and that's my final comment, is we could designate another area as B1 and rezone it, therefore it could use it, blah, blah, blah. And they could submit a request to say, please rezone this to a B1. It meets all the other criteria, we're all good. Therefore, we are not truly excluding it from the state law requirement of us not precluding this. Gulp. It's kind of a little messy. And that's why I asked Jennifer and you to understand it.
We're away from you to measure. Basically, I did not consider, well, number one, Mountain House is out of jurisdiction, out of our jurisdiction. I don't know if that plays a role or not. And number two, I'm not convinced that the facility in Mountain House is truly child care. Per the state definition of what they need. I don't know.
My understanding is the rule says two different types of verbiage associated with a residential childcare versus a public childcare. I don't know enough about the two to understand whether the childcare that was established or could be reestablished on an annual basis by Vail Resorts in the Mountain House, either today or Gulp, in the future revision of Mountain House. If they choose to put a more larger and per request of a lot of people or number of people, putting a childcare, not just resort, just ski school in that area, how does that work? I mean, did they just effectively preclude, what if it exists today? We've approved it, it's already there. It gets a little messy at best, and I'm trying to understand, I guess,
If
some of the
there's a-
legal and physical characteristics.
Yeah, if there's a new childcare center or one of these school uses that comes in after a natural medicine business is operating in a space, then that 1,000 feet does not apply.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keystone is, I mean, you all know this. Keystone is challenging in this respect. Many other communities are putting these uses in industrial zones. And you don't have an industrial zone district in Keystone. You don't have a business park area that would be conducive to these types of uses. So what Lindsay and I did is try to figure out the best place that might be most analogous, and it really is not ideal.
Yeah, and I just want to add from a practical matter, our size and our market, I mean, I would be in our 10 years, very surprised if there'd be more than one applicant
Yeah.
to get approval.
Tim?
Oh, I just realized.
Are you?
Jennifer, I had just some small things. I thought the ordinance, the draft ordinance was really well done. It seemed very reasonable to me. There's just on page 4 of the ordinance, there's a figure 3-3 that says land use by district. And it says it's amended to include natural medicine businesses. Is that referring to the B1 zoning district being amended to include natural medicine? I didn't know, I just thought maybe we needed text or something on that little graph to know what that means.
So this is a large graph. I might be able to pull it up and share on the
Yeah,
screen.
maybe
And
it's because it's a little tiny piece of it, but it just wasn't clear.
yeah, let me see if I can pull it up here. I might actually, this is probably not in your, Lindsay, do you know if it's in your land use code that you have for Keystone?
It is.
Okay. But is it in your, in the Keystone one online?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna just go to Summit County because that's easier. Okay, so if I can share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the figure 3.3 that we're amending.
Right.
And it's essentially what it does is it lists all of the different land uses in alphabetical order. I think it's alphabetical.
Okay, right.
And then, so we're just adding in between motor vehicles and Nordic Ski Center, we're adding natural medicine businesses. And then we're saying that it is a permitted use under this first column. Yes, it's permitted with an X.
Right.
And then we say, see section, whatever section that is next to it.
Okay, but and so when it talks about land use by district, that's what was thrown.
The district is B1,
Okay, it does, so that was my question. Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. And that's just what this table is called.
Okay, yeah, okay,
We didn't change that. That's just what it's called.
okay, got it, okay, super. I have another just real small thing, and then Steve has a follow-up. On page 5, section 7, there's a reference to the town of Netherland.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's right, yeah, just that, I just caught it.
We actually
Thank
put that
you.
in deliberately to.
Just
To
So I dutifully read the
So
whole.
thank you.
Okay, sure, of course, okay.
In between my second and third cup of coffee.
Steve, you had another question.
Yeah, Jennifer, just clarification for myself. So it says the natural medicine facility, you cannot, it's not permitted as a home occupation,
Right.
but is it clear that a person could grow it for personal use if they follow the rules and regs as outlined? Is that accurate?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Diane.
So question's a little bit of a follow-up of that because I was focusing on G, personal cultivation, where it says not visible or detectable from outside the property. And I was wondering, what happens if some neighbor says they did detect something? You know, because you talked about enforcement is tough, so I was curious. That work?
So there may be, and I don't know the answer to this, there may be under state law. Well, that's probably, I'd have to look at this. I'd have to figure out if there is a provision under state law which talks about enforcement related to that. But you know, we can bring land use violations, bring an action in court to enforce them. Those are a little bit challenging, especially for that type of thing. But what would happen is that the town staff would contact that person and tell them that here's our regulation that we have in town and advise that they need to be complying with the regulation. And it would be an education and most times that resolves the issue.
So it would, we work from the zoning perspective with code enforcement on a complaint basis, unless there's something just absolutely blatant. So it's sort of self-policing. Now, with that being said, I would want some degree of proof somehow, some way, depending on the type of violation. And then we would act upon that.
Yeah. Any questions, more questions?
And one more.
Yes.
Jennifer, this is just so I understand, when they're talking about security systems and they say it's set forth in Colorado law and codes and regulations, I'm just curious what that, you know, what is the level of security? I guess the concern I have is just with everything that's going on in the world today, somebody may be absolutely against this type of medicine. I'm just making, just want to make sure that they have the right security measures in place as far as access and, you know, do the best so people can't break in or whatever. I'm just curious what the state law says regarding that.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to pull up the natural medicine regulations.
Internet is always slow when you're trying to go fast.
Oh, I'm going fast. I'm going through these
No,
pages
you
fast.
are, yeah.
Think
It's
about how
not
many
you.
pages you're trying
I
to go through
know.
is
No,
probably more the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I
There's an
know it's
awful lot
of
not you.
material.
Yeah, I mean, I know we can't change it. I was curious for the level more. Just the generals.
It's a light 400 page reading of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
cross-reference.
Okay.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
don't need to.
I mean, I'm not sure that I can answer it correctly,
Exactly.
but I'm happy to share that with you, Steve. I mean,
Later on, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, it's not critical.
I'd also like
Yeah.
to, I find myself saying this a lot lately. You need to get something on the books.
Right.
We believe that this is a good
Yeah.
first start.
Yeah.
And, we've done the analysis. We've incorporated, we are relying on state statute
Right.
for a portion of it, licensing, sorry.
Right.
That being said, if there is a gap, we can always amend the ordinance if deemed necessary.
Right. Right.
So I just
No,
want
no,
to.
it's good. I think,
If it's not perfect and we miss something, we can always backtrack.
Right. I think at this point, then we're ready to vote on whether we move this proposed ordinance forward to the council.
So just clarification, Jennifer, are we treating this as a public hearing? Do we need to open up this to the public?
no, it's not a public hearing.
Okay, all right, just want to clarify.
I
could
did,
I-
if you guys would like, I have found information about security requirements.
It's okay if you wait. It's a way to move things along. I'm totally fine.
Okay. Well, I can share that with you offline, Steve, if you'd
Yeah.
like.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Just
Thank
Pete
you.
Madland, if you would add me on that list of pointer
Yes.
to the reg or the information.
Okay, I will do that.
I think then we're ready for a motion. Can I do the motion, or it's probably better for other people to do
Typically, the
it?
chair does not.
I don't move, right.
And again, this will be, if there is motion, a recommendation onto council.
Right.
There's a proposed motion in the staff report on page 10.
Ooh, if I can paraphrase, I'd move that we recommend as is this to the town council,
The proposed.
the
ordinance.
proposal ordinance, yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of moving the proposed ordinance forward to council for their approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed, say nay. Okay, I think the ayes have it, and we've moved it forward. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
You're welcome. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, awesome
Thank you.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That was our big thing for tonight, although we have two more really big things in terms of paperwork. So our next item of business is the comprehensive plan engagement report. Lindsay, do you have anything, or?
I'd just like to basically pass this off to Dylan. What I will say is, and I'm stating the obvious, but basically what you got in your packets is a summary of what all the public outreach that's been
Right.
done in order to garner what the people of the town of Keystone think is important and is needed in our master plan. So Dylan can walk you through it. We believe it's pretty comprehensive and quite frankly, the public outreach for the size of our community and the makeup of our community was quite good with regards to the turnout.
Yeah.
We're pleased with the amount of data we gathered.
I think you should be. It was really amazing to read through it. Go ahead, Dylan.
I'm sorry.
Welcome
Thank
again.
you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here with you all in person.
Yeah.
I feel like I've done a lot of virtual attendance lately,
Yeah.
but it's good to be up here again. Yeah, sorry I sent you over 100 pages.
Right, yeah, it was
All right.
a lot.
I know it's a lot, but I also, I figured, it's your information.
We should see
You
it.
should be able to see it. With all that said, yeah, thanks again for having me. So I have slides. I'll probably just use them more as a bit of discussion points, but a lot of the stuff that's in this presentation is stuff that was in the materials that you got. So I'll start with just kind of walking through the engagement. I'll go through each of the slides, and if there's any questions you all have, I'll pause before we transition to the next topic, and we can take questions, ask for any clarification, anything of that nature. I think between the last time I was here and the packet materials, some of this is going to be, stuff that you're probably already, you might already know off the top of your head, or things that you're pretty well versed in, but I want to give us this opportunity to just go through it, because I think it'll help set the stage for the next part. So we had 274 complete survey responses, which is huge. And that's after filtering out folks that do not either live, work, or in Keystone, which is, yeah, again, that's always kind of a funny one.
Yeah.
This happens in every community we work in.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're guessing kind of as an educated guess, 135 in-person participants between the multiple engagement events that we held. And to Lindsay's point, I also want to just give some recognition to your town staff, Gabby, Lindsay, Jessica, and Andrew before he left. They all did a really good job also of putting out material on social media, putting out, getting the word out to HOAs. Just, we would give them advertising materials, but they did a really good job of making sure that, it got out to the proper channels. And I want to give them that credit too, because I think that did really result in a good turnout too. And it only got more robust as we went along. So I think there's, people are paying attention. That's important. We've held 6 community engagement events thus far. 5, this is now the 6th time I've come to meet with you all. 5 council meetings as well. And then we had 6 stakeholders discussions. And by stakeholders, I mean, we've met with Vail Resorts, we've met with CDOT, we met with folks from just the HOA business community as well, just to kind of understand what it is that they're thinking about. So our timeline, we had our way back when Jessica was representing the town as an RTAP student. We helped participate in the community visioning workshop, which was a great experience for us. May, we held 2 open house events. In July, we held an open house event. And then Lindsay, Jess, and I got to hang out at the Bluegrass and Beers Festival and meet a lot of, actually it was a really interesting time to meet a lot of part-time residents that were up here to join the festival, which I think was a group that we hadn't heard quite as much from by that point. So that was really great. And online survey has been open since May. The survey demographics. So some of this is also me trying to follow up a little bit on what was not included in our last presentation, just to kind of help break some of this down a little bit more. So 52% of the respondents were full-time residents, 40% part-time, 71% homeowners, and 33% empty nesters. So this is just kind of, I think statistically, it's almost a little bit of the microcosm of your community, right? In terms of that split between full-time and part-time residents and homeowners versus renters and folks that are, the household makeup. 24% live in Keystone, have lived in Keystone for 2 to 5 years, 23% 20+ years, which I think is pretty cool, having that context. 30% were couples with children, 12% were households without children. It is kind of interesting how it does seem to really follow it. When you were looking at the initial chapters you might have seen from the community profile, I think it kind of mirrors a little bit of the actual population statistics. These were kind of the top 5 priorities. And this, I want to make sure I'm clear on this, is a distillation of not only the survey responses, but also us trying to parse through the feedback that we got from in-person engagement, since I'm sure many of you saw when you were here for open house meetings that there was similar questions that we were asking in person in survey. In some ways, we wanted to try and make sure that people that didn't show up in person were given the same opportunities to provide answers to questions that we were asking folks that were coming in person. So we wanted to make sure that it was, equitable in that sense for people that were not able to show up for whatever reason. So this is us trying to aggregate basically the universe of everything we've heard throughout the different types of engagement. So the top priorities were conserving and access to natural environment. 94.1% of the survey respondents considered this essential or very important. I'm sure that's not a big surprise. Promoting community gathering opportunities. So there's a strong desire for more connection and social spaces. I think there's a lot of folks that maybe felt like that sort of sense of like a community gathering space was something that was somewhat missing. Improving ease of getting around, walking and biking infrastructure is a big priority. We've talked about this ad nauseum in my time, at least, getting to work with you all, and I know that this was salient for the incorporation process as well. So continues to be a big priority. Ensuring health and wellness opportunities are represented. So something that we started seeing in both the survey and in the in-person feedback was that folks felt like access to trails is great, access to the resort is great, but there was a lacking of indoor recreation opportunities. And then number 5 was maintaining affordability for, there's a bit of a split between some of the things that we've heard thus far with regards to affordability. I think that there's a pretty good representation of what we would consider deed restricted housing units in Keystone. And I think a decent share when you consider it at the county level. But then again, there are also some folks that have indicated through their survey responses that they feel like they're not having an easy time affording that next level of housing or the housing that they want. So those were some of the priorities that rose to the top based on both the online and in-person engagement. From the online engagement, this was one of those open-ended questions. So one of the open-ended questions towards the end of the survey, you might remember, was community investment preferences. So what did folks want to see the town take a more active role in investing in? So 68% said parks and recreation, maintenance and upgrades. So that was the biggest one. 60% were economic development and village revitalization. And then 57% were transportation improvements. And then, so those all, really stuck out for us. But then kind of going down into the next tier was environmental stewardship initiatives at 35% and affordable housing at 30%. So growth and development, this is a distillation of both in-person and online feedback. And so I tried to break this down into concerns. What is the community concerned about? And what is the community supportive of? So these are, as things come across your desk in the future, it might be helpful just to understand what would be something that the community would maybe have a red flag on and what would be something we would generally support based on the engagement that we did for this plan. So concerns were new growth shouldn't impact natural environment, preserve the small town feel, manage traffic impacts, regulate design and form. And then this community is generally supportive of community serving retail, diverse affordable housing options, development that matches the character of the community and meeting essential community needs. So I'm going to pause here just because I think that there's a bit of a zoning nexus in the sense that when people were asked about whether or not zoning should be something that's really focusing on regulating uses or regulating the look and feel of the buildings and like the built environment itself. Generally, the feedback we got is that people were more concerned about making sure that the built environment looked and felt in such a way that it was cohesive with the community, and were a little less concerned about what the use is. So in general, they were more concerned that a new development looks good, feels good, doesn't feel like it's impacting the community and is harmonious with the natural environment, and less concerned about whether or not it's a residential use or a new restaurant or anything like that. Mm-hmm. That was
natural medicine.
Yeah. Or not. So under the parks and trails, this was kind of an interesting one, is that almost 52% rate the current recreation opportunities as great. So that's pretty good. Actually, it's pretty good. As somebody who looks at a lot of community surveys on a regular basis. And clear demand does seem to exist for expansion of indoor and some outdoor access opportunities. So some of the things that rose to like in the feedback in terms of outdoor access opportunities that maybe are a little less on offer now were things like public river access or outdoor playgrounds or things of that nature. And then there were some folks that were saying that, from what I understand based on the feedback, there's a lot of an overcrowding issue going on at the Silverthorne Rec Center. And so some folks feel like it would be nice to have more indoor opportunities close by. So almost 55% were in favor of new indoor opportunities. 46% were in favor of more hiking trails, and almost 34% were in favor of public river access. I also understand that there are some other water quality issues with regards to the Snake River. So that's maybe, something to just kind of keep in the back of mind. But additional priorities that were kind of below that 30% threshold were mountain biking specific trails, playgrounds, and picnic areas. So transportation, I broke this out into what were some of the transportation initiatives that people cared about. And then there was a secondary question, which was with regards to intersection improvements. We've heard a lot about Highway 6 being kind of dangerous. As I was driving in here, actually, I saw 2 children walking along the shoulder of Highway 6, and that made me really scared. So, we wanted to be intentional about asking a question about, if we were to prioritize some investments in improving intersections along Highway 6, what would be the top priorities? So the initiatives that people were in favor of, almost 70% were improved pedestrian safety across US 6. It feels like, something that we've all talked about a lot. 58% were better pathway connectivity. So something that we've heard both in person and just in feedback from the community surveys, that the community path and the Snake River Rec path, it can be a little confusing at times to navigate or know where to turn or where you're going or how to access it, even if you're coming from a condo development. Improved bikeability and then enhanced local transit. So some folks were feeling like they're not necessarily able to meet their needs for transit by relying solely on both the Summit Stage and the Keystone Resort shuttles, and also acknowledging the Keystone Resort shuttles transition in the summer to being on call and then also offer service in shoulder season. So I think there was folks that were talking about improved transit access that's able to meet more of the local need beyond just the circulators from the resort, and also relying specifically on Summit Stage. So with regards to US 6, number 1, Racer Drive intersection, which I think we're all probably not super surprised about. Number 2 was West Keystone Road, and then East Keystone Road and Montezuma Road. Those were the top 4 that people provided feedback.
Just a quick question.
Please, yeah.
The rating was how people perceived it. I'd be curious to how the traffic engineer would preserve, how would his order be different?
Yeah, that's a good, I'm glad you actually asked that. So one thing that we have in the background, we're lucky, is that, it's not just SE Group that's working on your comprehensive plan. I have EPS working on the housing needs assessment for you all, which you heard from Brian. I guess that was last month. And then also in the background, who you probably heard a little less from, is transportation subconsultant, Fair and Pierce. So we have transportation engineers that have had access to all of this feedback, and they're also looking at that. And then we asked them to take it with their own professional lens about how would they prioritize their own recommendations based on their expertise.
Just curious, like, I'm making this up, they may say US 6 and Montezuma. It'd be nice, but there's too much movement there, other than a bridge going over,
Right.
It's not going to happen. So, I'd like to just understand that. So when it comes forward to whether it's funding or whatever else, we at least have a more educated response to town council on it. So.
Absolutely. And we're trying to make sure that the recommendations that we provide with regards to transportation improvements take that into consideration. One, we want to be responsive to community feedback and make sure that they feel like their input is reflected in the plan, but we also want to be strategic about what opportunities make most sense for the town, knowing that you have, limited public dollars that you can invest in projects.
A little minor note. I understand the percentages. And then when I looked at it from a different perspective, brand new, I thought only 37% of the people wanted or mentioned Razor or 69. The problem is people can misinterpret that to mean that the reverse is true. They don't want improved pedestrian safety. In other words, there's 31% of the people don't want that. That is not a good perception of the numbers. You might want to introduce slightly the characteristic of the percent. It's not, the inverse is not true. It's not like 42% of the people say that better pathways I don't want.
Sure.
Because so some of the numbers, even though they're less than 50% or around 50% or 30%, are actually extremely strong numbers. Sure. And anybody who looks at just that side alone might get them a misinterpretation.
Yeah, that's a good point, Peter. I appreciate that. I'll make sure to review the questions and make sure that we didn't ask any meeting or misinterpreting, so that we can understand how the numbers are quoted.
Because people reading that can get the inverse, and that's not at all true.
For sure. Yep. I will also say that I think for this particular question with regards to the intersection improvements, people could select more than one. So that may also be a situation where people chose multiple options and the numbers are kind of spread across a higher range.
I would also say that the enhanced local transit, there's probably, if this leans more towards residents or people who are here part-time, that isn't as big an issue. That's a huge issue for the second homeowners or the rental guests who probably aren't reflected here. And one of the problems we face now is, the parking lots are full all the time because people who should be taking the shuttle are driving because they don't like the shuttle system. And I'm not sure that 34.5 is really reflective of how big of an issue that is.
Sure. No, that's good input. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay. Okay. Economic vitality. So some of the top strategies were Lakeside Village revitalization, streetscape and walkability improvements, and then activating River Run in the off season. So something that we've heard about is restaurants that aren't able to stay open year round.
I'm just curious, when people answered this, and I agree with all of that, did they understand that we probably don't have any control over what happens at River Run? Did they understand? I mean,
I think that I would not underestimate the savviness of the responders. I think that a lot of folks are very aware that Vail Resorts is the primary landowner.
and then I'd use the reverse of this. I think that whoever, whether it's the mayor and councilman, I think this information when it's done, it's like, guys, you want to improve your bottom line. This is what the public's telling you. So I would encourage us to tell the council, use this. Whoever's got the relationship, sit down and say, listen, we got facts to back up what we're asking for. So you're about P&L. Why don't you look at some of this? So.
One of the stakeholders that we had the opportunity to talk with in this project is Vail Resorts, and something that they said was that they feel that their resorts thrive when the communities that their resorts operate in thrive. So I think it kind of echoes your point, Steve, that you have information you can go back to them with, which is important.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay, I think that should be some formal meeting, whoever the people need to go.
So those do occur at least monthly between the town manager and the mayor.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, online, we have a little presence who have been listening and do a great deal of our conversation and the council. So even today, I believe that's true.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so desired business types that people were reflecting. So restaurants was the highest, mail services, bars and breweries, medical services, and additional retail. Okay, so we asked a specific question around Lakeside Village. It's something we heard about from various sources of input about. Lakeside Village kind of feels like it's this place that's a little bit been forgotten about. And so we wanted to ask people, what kind of life would you like to see breathed into Lakeside Village? And so desired improvements were events and live music, restaurants and bars year round, public art, more seating areas, kid-friendly spaces, maybe better river access and improved parking. So I think one thing that's maybe interesting when you think about Lakeside Village is that it's not really viewable from Highway 6, right? Like, if you know, right? You know that there's this really cool space that's on a lake looking out over beautiful mountains. I would almost argue that in any other mountain community, that would be like the place where everybody would go to hang out, right? It'd be like probably on your cover photos for all your presentations. It'd be like the place. And so I think one thing that's maybe interesting is that it not being necessarily something that people know about immediately, like they would have to park in a lot, go under an underpass and then walk what looks like maybe like a space they maybe shouldn't be in.
There's some even basic things, like there's a sign for River Run Village. There's no sign for Lakeside Village. And I fought that battle for years. Why can't we get the same kind of sign on the highway with Lakeside Village? Oh, it's a CDOT. Well, it was everything's a CDOT issue, but if you could get it there for River Run, you can get it there for Lakeside Village too.
So what I will say with regards to the rapport with CDOT, since the town has become a town, we are getting much more response from CDOT.
Okay.
So
That's good.
That was the hope.
Yeah.
Getting callbacks and the communication is quite good.
Yes,
Yeah,
direct
good.
rather than indirect.
Good.
Yeah, I would say in general, my experience, towns, cities have much better
Yeah.
chance getting seat out to the table than unincorporated
Sure.
portions of counties. It's, yeah. So in with regards to the environment sustainability, environmental stewardship just is continually rising as a top priority for folks. I think a lot of people indicated that a major reason why they chose to live in Keystone, whether that's part-time or full-time, is because of the connection to the natural environment. It really does feel like a place where you are integrated into the natural environment very seamlessly. I mean, look out our windows here, right? And so I think that that is continually rising to the top as a priority. So specific things that the folks thought that the town should play a role in with regards to environment sustainability, wildfire hazard mitigation. I looked at your sign out front right now. I know you guys are doing work on this as we speak, and I think that's awesome. And I think the more that we can continue to point to that as an opportunity within the community, it's great. Snake River water quality and ecological health, this kind of dovetails a little bit with some of the public river access that we talked about as something that people were indicating as a recreation opportunity. I know that there's been various committees in the past that have looked at Snake River water quality and trying to find out what ways they can invest in improvements. And you know, I think as long as you guys are open to continuing that conversation, I think that is rising to the top for folks. Water conservation, composting and waste management, and then building energy efficiency. Which is, I know, maybe a little bit of a tricky one, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, your building regulations are still reviewed at the county level. Is that correct, Lindsay?
That is correct.
Okay, so that one might be a trickier one to necessarily incorporate into your own local ordinances. With regards to housing, these are just some statistics. We asked an open-ended question about in what way have people been either affected or positively experienced housing in the community. So something that did occur, some things that we heard, about 56% had indicated they had to move to a smaller or lower quality housing unit. 53% of respondents said that they were unable to buy a home or were having to spend more time renting than they really hoped. About 52 said that they needed to live with roommates or live with additional family members in order to be able to afford their home. And then 42% said that they had to move further away from their job location. 38% had said that they had to move away from the area altogether due to housing costs, which I think that's a little bit of a trickier one. There are a decent representation of survey respondents that are people that work in Keystone. When we were holding engagement at the Bluegrass and Beers Festival, I happened to meet a few people that have worked in Keystone for a while and have had to bop around to various parts of Summit County to find housing. I think what's really tricky about housing, and I think Brian touched on this during the last time he was presenting the housing needs assessment, I think a lot of people in Summit County view housing at the regional scale and not necessarily at the community scale. I think that there's a lot of people that make their housing choice based on availability of what meets their most of their needs, not necessarily the exact location of it. And I think as you get to different income levels, people make decisions based on location more so than maybe people that are just at lower income levels. Steve?
Quick question. I was just around curiosity. How much of that do you think, your opinion, the 56.9 is more a reflection? How much, we all know that resort communities just cost more. It's just, it's very difficult to get in. But how much of that is affected just by the state of the economy today? I don't know. I'm not discounting it at all. I absolutely agree with that, because we have friends that have done just that have gone, either have sold or said, you know what, we're renting it all the time and we're only going to come out 4 times a year type thing. So
yeah, I don't know. And another thing that I think could also be incorporated within this particular statistic is that they maybe moved to a smaller housing unit, not necessarily for economic reasons, but just for lifestyle reasons.
Yes.
I think that there's plenty of people that are maybe empty nesters and just don't need a 4-bedroom home anymore, and maybe they, downsize as well.
And that is in that 56.9.
Yeah.
No way to distinguish. Can I also comment? We have 800 workforce housing units out of 3,500. How does that compare to our peer communities in Summit County? And that says a very high percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is in the housing needs assessment. So there's a comparison of the workforce housing units that are within Keystone and the share of housing units in Keystone, and then comparing that to the number in Summit County and comparing that at the county level. And I can tell you just off the, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I can remember that you all are doing better than the county in the percentage.
Because we've got wintergreen.
It's not 800, it's not 800 out of 30, isn't it 800 plus 3,200? It's not.
No, there's 3,500 total housing units. I hope that's.
Round numbers.
Had that written down.
That's the total housing units in Keystone.
Yeah, but the 800 I thought was part of that.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
It is. It's-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so of that, yeah, which is a big chunk.
That's a
Yeah.
big number.
it is. Yeah. It's-
We are doing better than the county.
You are. Yeah. And again, the exact numbers.
Say everything's
Right.
fine.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Percentage wise, I think we were almost 2 to 1 higher from what I remember on the transportation discussion
Really? Wow.
than the average of the entire county. It was,
Good. No, it's good.
notable.
So, yeah, I mean, numbers are certainly important with regards to how many we're supplying. But it doesn't necessarily address the need, different types of needs.
Yes.
It doesn't address if affordable is really affordable.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, another thing
It's a
too,
huge issue with them.
Yeah,
and this is another thing, there's no value assessment here. It's just that it's just true is that a lot of those 800 units, a fair number of them are also specifically reserved for people that are bail reserves.
right.
Right.
So not necessarily people that.
Yeah.
Some
Percentage of it is.
Yeah.
So this is an open-ended question that I actually kind of liked, and I'm glad we're bringing it here, which is the relationship to tourism in the town, because I don't really think that was something that I heard a lot about anecdotally in the conversations that I had with folks, but it was good that I think it showed up pretty highly in the survey. So I tried to break it down into things that people talked about with relationship to tourism that were considered benefits, and then things that I considered challenges. So things that people were maybe, for lack of a better word, felt like were difficulties that they had to just navigate as a reality of living here, and then things that people viewed as, you know, a positive benefit to the community. So the benefits: economic vitality and job creation, events and cultural amenities, support for local businesses, and property values. Some of the challenges were winter traffic congestion, for sure.
Yeah.
Overcrowding during peak times, lack of respect for community and the environment, and then housing cost increases and infrastructure strain, right? So folks that are, you know, in that part of that winter traffic congestion that are, you know, causing undue impacts to your infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
Minor note is property values and housing cost increases are the
Right,
same
the same-
sword
Yeah,
on two sides.
It is, totally.
I mean.
Yeah, either side of the coin.
Yep.
Yeah. definitely.
And, you know, I think.
And if we do and then if we don't.
Especially mountain communities in Colorado right now are dealing with this.
Yes.
I'll let
Yeah.
everybody else do that.
Yeah. I like the way you say the key insight that people, and I remember reading the report you sent to so many people said, well, look, we wouldn't exist if we didn't have the tours. We can't.
Yeah.
Forget it's, yeah.
In this general
So-
topic, I do have a little comment. When I was reading through the document, all 190 plus
Yeah.
pages.
Yeah.
One of the earlier sections talked about the various characteristics of visitor future residences. And one of the things I noticed was a certain lack, a lot of information until another 5, 10 pages later or 40, did it really talk about how critical tourism is to the fundamental economy. It was very, very obvious when you look down at the numbers, like 90+% of our entire economy is driven by the tourism business. But I would have liked to seen something on the very first line right up front talking about the critical nature of tourism in our economy. It felt like it was absolutely hit hard and correctly so down lower. But right up front in that first visitors and future residents thing, I would have thought I would have saw that as one of the first lines in the whole thing to make sure people understand we are in the 90+ percentile with regards of our economy in the tourism business.
Sure.
Just a minor,
I want to make sure I understand what it is specifically you're talking about. Is there like a question that you felt?
it was more of the fact that I read through an awful lot of material before I got the obvious of that. And it was a section 1, visitors and future residents. It was just, I kind of expected to see a big one-liner saying the entire economy or the critical nature of the economy is tourism based.
I'm with you now.
Some flavor of the
In the
primary
plan.
This is
introduction.
in the plan outline,
In the
when we're
plan
talking
itself,
about
we're
the
talking.
user guide information.
You're not sure, right? Yeah.
It was in the
Sounds like-
section titled, section 1, visitors and future residents. The problem is I got lost on,
Yeah.
sorry, which I didn't write down the page I should have.
I'm with you. I understand what you're saying now.
It's a minor thing, but it's one of the needs to stand out because a lot of people don't appreciate it.
For sure. And so I tried to put this key insight together, which is just sort of my synthesis of what I'm kind of reading the tea leaves of the input with regards to tourism, which is that many residents want tourism managed rather than eliminated, with emphasis on maintaining family-friendly character and avoiding becoming another Breckenridge.
It's an excellent way of describing it.
Yes.
I think that's,
Yeah, I think that's really
Very
nicely
well
done.
said.
thumbs up on that one.
Yeah.
That's good.
Very nice.
Nobody wants to be burned.
Yeah.
So this is my kind of way of synthesizing the takeaways, and I tried to break it into like what to preserve and what to change. And so what to preserve: small town, family-friendly atmosphere, access to the natural environment and trails, free parking, particularly everyone, quiet, peaceful character, wildlife habitat, scenic beauty, less crowded feel versus other resort towns. What to change, or what people might be actually open to seeing look and feel differently in your community: Highway 6 safety improvements, better connectivity between village areas, revitalization of Lakeside, improved walkability and bikeability, more year-round business activity, and better local transit and parking solutions.
Yeah.
So
Very nice,
Very good.
very nice.
Is there, I'm just curious from your standpoint, did anything surprise you in all of this, either plus or good or bad? And how did these answers relate to other communities that you say were like us? Just more curious if we're all of like minds and these are the same issues we're dealing with, or we've got some unique ones here.
it's a really good question. I would say maybe, if anything, I was surprised a little bit by the type of responses we were getting on the US 6 safety improvements. I thought Racer Drive was not a surprise to me, but some of the other intersections, I thought, you know, when I look at it from as being a professional planner myself, I was like, oh, I think there's other areas I probably would have chosen myself. But, you know, I don't live here every day, so I don't know. I can only rely on the lived experience of other people to help fill in my gaps of knowledge that I don't have. But generally, I wasn't super surprised. I think that's probably just in part because I've looked at a lot of these community surveys, so not really a surprise anymore.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I would say for me is a sign of like optimism is that I would say that you're just what to preserve and what to change. I've never broken out a community takeaway like that before. And I think part of what inspired me to do that is that it actually did seem like there was a lot that folks were interested in actually seeing some new ideas come to fruition. And I think it's my hunch is that it's probably because there's a lot of inertia as you all are incorporated as a new town. And I think people are excited about you know, what comes next. And so I think because of that, there's probably in a lot of communities that we work in, and especially mountain communities, I would say the column that's pretty evenly weighted between what to change and what to preserve. I would say in most communities I work in, the what to preserve side would be twice as long, and what to change side would be maybe 3 things.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense on a new community.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I haven't looked exactly what John is presenting on Saturday. I know I have his slides, but I just got them this afternoon, but that one slide would be a perfect slide
Yeah, I
as
love
a,
that slide.
as a synopsis of the whole
Yeah.
planning process.
That's marketing, right?
Summarized it very well.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that one slide would be a great
Yes.
synopsis to present to the KOA annual meeting.
I will ask Dylan, I'm asking you,
Yep.
send this slide and I really started this incorporating.
And I'm not sure what, like I said, I can look right now because I just got it today, but I don't think he's talking about the.
I've not seen his presentation, to be quite
Here,
honest.
I'm bringing it up right now.
He does not have that slide.
Investigating.
I think 3 would be the thing about the tourism that you brought up, and then the slide and
Yeah.
your quote, I think those would be.
Yeah, I think just
Yeah.
as a way of presenting the kind of the key takeaways, which is what it's called, from the planning process. This slide would be great.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, perfect.
Well, you'll have the presentation in your inbox before I leave tonight.
Just a point of clarification, more year-round. Really? Yeah.
Just trying to keep you on your toes here.
More year-round business activity, didn't we hear that in the form of shoulder seasons? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought too, along, in the same vein that we all love this slide so much, this is also like a perfect slide for that in the plan.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
absolutely.
You know, it's always funny the way you find out little tricks and things as you're kind of working through the process.
Right.
We wrote those chapters, put our pin down almost 2 weeks ago. And then I put these slides together 2 days ago. So, yeah, it would be nice. I think that I'm taking mental notes about what things I would do a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Go back and put our pins back into the plan editing itself. How we want to present certain things.
Of everything we've seen, I
Great.
would say that's one of the strongest mechanisms and the strongest short, concise,
Yeah.
covers
Yeah.
a huge percentage of what I've heard, seen, gathered over the last couple of
then
months.
you're not getting the percentages and people interpreting percentages differently.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about 100 of the pages into
Yeah.
this one slide.
Yes, I also, for what it's worth,
No.
I took the 100-page report and tried to distill all that down into
Yeah.
an executive summary so that we can make that also an appendix and
Right.
plan too, just so it's,
Perfect.
I think it would be.
You might even put that up,
We'd probably run into our accessibility.
you might even put that up at the very beginning, as in, here's the executive summary.
Yeah.
And literally that is a perfect start for true CEO, CFO kind of executive level
Perfect.
material.
This was just some success factors. We've pretty much covered all this. This is also one of those things where I'm looking at this slide and realizing we've talked about this kind of already. But this was, I think, 7 key things that we should probably plan to hit on in this plan to make sure that it feels like it's successful. Highway 6 safety improvements, balancing tourism, economic benefits, and resident quality of life, revitalization of Lakeside Village, expanding indoor rec opportunities, protecting the natural environment, improving connectivity, and between villages and supporting workforce housing without comprising character of the community.
Yeah.
So,
Another slide.
Excellent.
I know. So, I'll pause here, because I think the next thing we're gonna talk about is plan drafting, the initial chapters you got to review.
Right.
And I do want to set like some table setting a little bit too,
Okay.
before we kind of get into the next couple of slides, because these slides are, I'm not gonna try and rehash all those pages into a slide format. That would just be.
Right, right.
That would be terrible. But they're more just prompting questions and guides that we can use. And I also put in some acknowledgements that I already have about things that I would do differently. But some key points just to help kind of table set here. So this is an initial text that we wanted to share with you early on, just to make sure, does the tone sound right? Are we generally kind of talking about things in the right way? Our recommendations, they're preliminary. After this discussion, we're going to go back in and make sure to beef them up and round them out a little bit more. There might even be new recommendations that come to fruition. I can already say that Lindsay and I have talked about a couple. Housing needs assessment is not finalized, and that'll inform the housing and land use chapters, and therefore we'll have probably additional recommendations that come after the housing needs assessment is finalized. And I think I flagged this earlier, but we're working on sort of that connectivity piece and the transportation piece, and that is not fully finalized either. We're still working in close coordination with our sub-consultants on that. So when that's done, that'll inform the transportation chapter, which I do anticipate being a more robust chapter.
Yeah, just to comment, I think what both Tim and Peter said, I think, you're going to start this whole thing out with the whole document, as you guys know better than we do. But I absolutely think that talking about upfront how important tourism is, and those couple of pages we talked about and summarized in your statement, I think if nobody gets past the first 3 pages, they get it.
Yeah.
And I think I learned that the hard way in what I do for a living. I tend to get too much into the rabbit hole, and people are like, huh? And I'm like, finally somebody pulled me on the side and said, here's you're up here, that you're already coming with the experience, tell them what the issue is. And so
Right.
my recommendation would be that should be
Sure.
kind of like the opening statement if they read nothing else. I don't know how
So we're transitioning now just for the record into the discussion of the draft outline for the report, just for the record that we're now doing that. But
You know, I think it is an absolutely incredible statistic that 68% of households here, permanent households, are 51 and over. And it's pretty much divided from the 51 to 64 and 65 plus. Again, looking at peer communities, so that has to be very high compared to peer communities in Summit County. So I would like a chance, because housing was my livelihood for so many years, decades. Is there any way it would be acceptable for me to talk to? I just would like to kind of see how the drafting is coming together. I'm not on the committee or anything, but I just would like to talk to them about some qualitative nuance and how they're going to, how that's going to be articulated.
Wendy, for my first question, who is they?
Well, you have a separate housing needs assessment
Okay.
going on, okay?
Yes.
That's, I mean, I've not been
Which part of-
contacted by anybody and,
No, that's fine. What I would like you to do, any questions you have, send to me
okay,
and I will filter them through.
okay.
Okay?
All
But
right.
I apologize for this. You need to do it sooner.
No, I will, yeah.
Because there are a lot of pieces moving right now.
Oh, I know.
And we are, again, you heard the first presentation last week.
Yeah,
We're taking a whole bunch of other input and incorporating those. So now is a good time for you to
Okay.
do that with me.
all right, I will do that.
Thank you.
Dylan, I had a question,
Please.
just overarching for the plan itself. Whose voice is speaking in the plan? Is the plan us, the town, talking to the people who reside here? Because just reading it, I got different feelings. Sometimes it felt like you all talking to us,
Yeah.
making recommendations for things we should do as the, sort of the governance of the town. But I thought, wait a minute, isn't this plan issued by the town so that it's the town speaking? So I wanted, that was something I didn't know if there's a specific voice that we should be focusing on.
I think it's a great question. I think it can, well, okay, I'm going to take the long approach to answering that question.
Okay.
So the long approach is, it's kind of all voices to some degree, right? Because I think so the common practice for a lot of communities when they're writing their comprehensive plans is exactly as the way that you all have done it, in the sense that you have hired an outside consultant firm who comes in and brings, experience doing this in other communities and et cetera, to come in and sort of analyze your situation, engage your community from sort of a neutral perspective, and then try and synthesize all that information and put it in there. And I think, so there are other communities, and we have worked with them after the fact, that have written versions of their comprehensive plan in-house. And I think the voice does sound different, right? Because then it's an intentional choice by the community planning team that is housed within that community to write that report. And usually those types of plans take on the voice of, here is what we as staff and as representatives of the town intend to do.
Right.
The voice that you often run into in plans like the one that we're working with you on, which is, initially written by the consultants, we tend to view it from a few different perspectives. There's a lot of input that goes into these plans, right? We just talked about the community engagement side. So part of the plan needs to be reflective of the community voice, right? The community's input. The other input is the conversations that we get to have with you, the conversations we get to have with council, the conversations we get to have with staff. And that's a totally different lens, right? Because you all are closer to the ground on some versions of planning choices and planning decisions that maybe members of the community don't have. just because they're not privy to the types of conversations you have, they're not privy to the knowledge that you've gained through this experience, and they don't necessarily balance all of the same priorities that you're trying to balance and the council's trying to balance. So then you also have the staff that are working through the process of every day and what's enforceable, what's legal, right? What are things that can actually be said and done? And they're stewards of the tax dollars that are collected. And so they have to be somewhat mindful of the investments that they can make. And then making sure that that's passes the electoral sniff test, right, with your council. And then there's also this other outside voice, which is reflected in a lot of the data that goes into the plan, right? We look at the community survey data from the census. We look at information that we gather from some combined housing authority. We look at information that we've gathered from various other demographic and economic, statistics. And then we try to neutrally present that information as an understanding of your world. And so in this type of plan, the voice really is, I think, probably us speaking to you.
Sounds like it's
And
speaking to us.
I think what we're doing though is we're not necessarily speaking directly to the planning commission. We're trying to speak to all of those different audiences in the community.
Yeah.
And, something that we've talked about with other communities, we being myself and Gabby, is, I'm pointing as though Gabby's she's here in spirit. Myself and Gabby, we've worked with other communities and we've had to talk about, there's a very real chance that you may not agree with every single recommendation that we put in this plan. But some of those recommendations are maybe being in the plan because they're trying in some way, shape or form to respond to one of those different audiences and the needs that they have. And not all the recommendations are things that you may choose to pursue as a town. We might put things in the plan as recommendations based on our best understanding of this is what the community told us, this is what the national best practice is related to X, Y, or Z thing. And we put it in the plan and then the plan, the working of the plan is up to your staff, to you, up to your council, and up to your community, right? To hold you accountable. Because it's up to you to decide as you take this plan, how you want to work it and what you want to do with it. So the way that we're writing the plan is, here's the information that we received from your community, from the data that we gathered and were able to collect. And here's our best synthesis of all that information and the recommendations that we were able to come up with. And we think that these recommendations are grounded in responding to the needs of the community or responding to the needs based on the data that we understand and our best understanding of national and state best practices.
Right. Okay.
And so that's kind of a long-winded.
No, that explains it. That makes sense. And then we take that and then as a town, do what we feel best with it, but we have your expertise and everything you gathered in synthesizing the input and all that. Yeah, okay, that makes
At
sense.
the end of the day, once adopted, it'll be your plan, the town's plan, to utilize with land use applications, code amendments, the whole gamut.
Right.
So it sets the stage, and I said this very early on, it's an advisory document in order to guide us in the right direction from a regulatory standpoint.
Right.
Yeah, I would add one key
Right.
characteristic of that is if it's something from you, it has to also be a consensus opinion. Not necessarily everybody agrees every part, as you said. I agree with that completely. You're never going to get 100%. The difficulty is if this is something we give to the outside community, our constituents or friends or neighbors, et cetera, I worry that if it's just your voice to us, that the consensus piece is missing. In other words, it doesn't sound like it's just like, oh, you recommended it, but we may ignore it. That's absolutely not something that should go into the plan. It has to be a consensus. I completely disagree with the idea that this can be only from you to us. It has to be, here's what you recommended, and here's the pieces that are a consensus agreement that we're adopting or using as what we're going forward with, because otherwise it's just yet another piece of paper, a plan that it can be ignored or will be ignored.
I think
And
you
it doesn't
really,
have teeth in it. It has to be
and address
consensus.
it to stakeholders. There's several stakeholders here, okay? And we're guidance to those stakeholders. So that to me is such an important clarification and understanding that that's who this is for.
Well, let me ask you this. So in what ways, so, part of the reason we're having this conversation right now, right, before we get too far along,
Right.
is in what ways do you think you would counsel us to make sure that the tone is reflective of what it is you're asking for?
Well, for me, why I asked this question is that when it got to the part, page 161 of the plan, of the draft plan, there is a whole big discussion. It's very fascinating about how Keystone's made up of PUD, and that our zoning is sort of irrelevant in light of the fact that we're almost all PUDs, and that part of your recommendation was that we consider completely doing rezoning everything. And when I read that, that's what got me asking this, because I thought, now, if that's in this document that goes to the public and we're sort of putting it out, then if we were to say, well, no, we don't want to spend the time rezoning, because you do say in there, well, it's a lot of time, it'll take years, maybe you don't need to do it. But then I would think the public would be like, well, wait a minute, the document said they recommended to rezone and you guys aren't rezoning. So that's what made me question, is that something that you should just say to us? Or is that something that should actually go in the plan?
That's a good point. And I do think that with, something I said earlier was you may not agree with every recommendation, but I do think that there are a number of them in which we should probably ground as if you think it's a non-starter from the get-go, we should talk about that. Because I do think that rezoning, that's probably one of the heavier recommendations.
Yes, that seemed like.
It's a couple sentences as a recommendation, but it carries probably the most weight, right?
Yes.
And so
And lost opportunity.
It got my attention, needless to say.
I think this is where myself as a planning consultant, I have about whether or not I think it's the right choice for you all in the long term. And I think that maybe that bias is represented in the plan, but if you think that that's not something that you all would even want to entertain, let us know. We'll take it out if you're planning.
Okay, guys, yeah, it's just.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, let's just remember to not, sorry, but just under Bob's rules, we're not supposed to have little side conversations. It's distracting. Go ahead.
The question I have is, we have to be careful that we are not imposing a filter and information's lost. That's all I want to be careful of. Yes. For my career, I've had your teams I've used for every project. And sometimes it's okay to have information out there that as a developer owner, I don't want out there, but there's also, when people read that, they take the report as being more credible. That's all. I'm not saying we should have said.
No, yeah.
I'm just saying, be very careful. We don't impose a filter that really.
Yeah, we make it like benign or something. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think it's, in the user guide section of the plan, which is something we talked about briefly earlier. I think it's important to recognize the public's role in this process, right? Which is once the plan is adopted, their role is to hold you all accountable to the vision of the plan, right? I think most people in democracy recognize that not every single thing that comes out of, a public planning document is going to necessarily come to fruition. I think most people in your community are going to recognize that you're not putting out a plan that's necessarily like a checklist with capital improvement associated with it. But I think most people in your community are going to recognize that, the vision that you've established in that plan is something that they will probably, hopefully hold you accountable for the next 5 to 10 years. And so, maybe the way to think about this is, what are you willing to put in your plan document that you expect the public to hold you to?
So maybe with the whole thing with the PUDs, that whole section, it's on page 161. We could talk we should talk a little, or I don't know. I feel like we need to talk a little bit about it, or
I think
maybe Lindsay can help us. Is that like a really frightening thing that should not be in the plan? Or is it like, no, it's okay, have it in there? I feel like I need to.
In my opinion, it's okay to talk about it, but I think there has to be the dose of reality of, can it even be executed in a way without leading the witness? But just, here's the facts.
Yeah.
It could be one of those things, that might happen over the next 20 years. So who knows, certain PUDs may go, yeah, let's see, I think it's better for part of this. And so it's okay to have a goal that may have a longer fuse to it.
That's
Just
true,
keep-
that's true.
that's
Yeah, no,
very
that's
true.
true.
Yeah,
That's
it's-
very true. That's
I
very
think-
true.
I think, I'll reveal the cards in terms of why we recommended that so strongly as a big recommendation.
Right.
I think the plan talks about this, that it's totally understandable why so much of the development that's happened in Keystone historically has formed under PUDs.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Right.
But I think
Very-
where you're at now as a community, given the amount of developable land that you have left and the amount, and the types of new development that you might get, largely infill development on existing vacant parcels or redevelopment of existing uses.
Right.
I think you'll have a more administratively difficult process in like getting what you want out of new development or regulating from a town perspective by leaving everything to PUD zoning, because it comes with its own tricky challenges of amendments and reopening PUDs. Underlying, you can change the base zoning by still, it's called a grandfathering clause. I think that term is changing, but that's generally what it's been referred to as the grandfathering clause of allowing all existing uses to continue
Right.
without any
Right.
legal ramifications to those existing uses, and adopting them all in as pre-existing uses that are non-conforming now to the base zoning districts, should you change the base zoning districts. But I think something to Peter's point, right, is that from earlier in the discussion is that you have three different areas that are zoned as that B1, and most of your current zoning now is PUD.
Right.
As new redevelopment comes to your community, as the market changes, as time marches on, as the need for different types of uses changes over time, it's going to be trickier and trickier for your staff and for you, your future planning and zoning commission members to, understand and regulate, your land use when most of your zoning is at a PUD, because it makes total sense that that's where the development came from. But I think you're trying to think now about moving forward, right? What do you want your underlying land use regulations to be in order to be able to get the most out of your regulatory environment when it comes to zoning?
Yeah.
And so that's our perspective.
Right, no, it made
Recommendation.
sense. It made sense. And I mean, you wrote it up very clearly. I mean, I understood it.
Very good job.
We'll obviously, we can just mull this over, but thank you
Yes.
very
please
much
do
for that.
Take your time with it. It's
Yeah.
a big change.
And we will be circling back on
Oh,
this.
yeah,
This is just
Yeah.
to introduce.
Yeah.
First couple chapters. Jessica and I responded to Dylan.
I think.
And certainly added some suggestions, not necessarily with regards to content, because we heard what we heard, but maybe some suggestions with regards to backing it up with regards to some data.
right.
Okay.
I had two other just little things. Do you want to hear them?
Oh, please, yeah.
On page 28 of this is now the draft plan. There's a mention that respondents were less interested in indoor recreation. And yet we have seen this in multiple charts where you say that's a big thing people want.
That might have just been a
And maybe that's just
copy
a
editing
typo.
error. Yeah, that might have just been a typo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Page. Page 28.
I'll flag that.
And then the other sort of little thing like that is page 146. In the third paragraph, there's a mention for the first time of just the acronym ACS data, but you haven't, it's later on, you explain what ACS that. So it's just to not use the acronym before you've explained.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure.
And so once more, just on how this is put together, in my previous day job, I took the Jerry Maguire movie approach. You had me at hello. I think there should be an executive summary based on specific.
Yeah, what
you've talked about, because people might not read all that, but if you do an executive summary, and they're like, I get it, I'm with you, you know, so I think putting an executive summary, and again, the trick is always, it's a summary, not another report. But I think taking those few slides that you did and condense it, talk about how important, understanding the economy is driven by tourism, your statement, which is spot on about what the feeling is about that, and then the challenges and what's good. I think you do that, and some, maybe there might be one or two other things. I think an executive summary absolutely should be part of this.
Yeah, I think he has it. I think he's got a little marker for it.
It's, we have a place.
More like what you showed today is.
Yeah, it's
You got gold.
perfect content.
Yeah, once we get through
Yeah.
all the other things and we iron out what recommendations are keeping and what are staying, I think it'll help us inform
Right.
executive.
Just had a
We do
I was pretty
intend.
much going to say the same thing. I saw that you wrote the executive summaries coming,
Yep.
but it's really critical. So I don't know what your plan is for when you'll give us a draft of that.
So this is one of those things where it's maybe a little frustrating for you all as reviewers, which is that the executive summary is probably the last thing, right?
Yeah.
That's just typically the process.
Sure.
Because we want to make sure that we have our
Make
narrative
sure
And I
that-
do understand that.
so that it's just
Be
accurately
prepared,
displayed.
be prepared for us to comment on
Yes.
that one. So
Fair enough.
if you can get us
I think we could-
sooner, it might be good.
I think we could do a teaser version of it.
Yeah.
Because,
Or at least a placeholder. This is what I'm gonna put
Right.
here. That would be.
we have a lot of information, right? You've seen the amount of engagement, some material we have. We also have a lot of data. We have a lot of information. We could probably cobble something together and just understand that it would probably be
Right.
rewritten a little bit in a future version.
But part of the reason we keep, maybe harping on that is because we know there are a lot of people that won't get past that. That's going to be the document for them.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. We're working in another community right now where the entire plan, they've told us, has to be 60 pages or less.
You're 80% done on those.
So you go to like 3.5?
Oh, yeah.
It has to be
That's good.
Yeah, a certain amount.
minimum 12 point for all documents, yes, so it's interesting.
Got a couple little items and one or two big ones that we'll probably need to do it elsewhere or in a subsequent review, but in the early section 2 about old plans, it's a little dangerous to mention the old plans that came from the county, especially we don't specifically define which ones do we think presently support our new plan or a new vision for it. I have heartburn with the TDR stuff because one, we do not have the section that is pending that talks about existing build out. And while knowing that and what the existing TDR buckets exist and whether legally we are even required to look at those or should we look at those, et cetera, those can drive density, which is my particular pet peeve or massive concern with regards to the Keystone. There's 2 different flavors of TDRs, et cetera. I don't need to get into all the details now, but my concern is it comes across initially when I started reading it as old plans were good and still apply.
Okay.
And I like looking at old stuff, what's changed, what's new, et cetera, but it's almost a little overpowering to be the first thing you start seeing is potentially information from an old plan that we or may not, and it may be only me, that I absolutely do not like certain characteristics of the old plan.
Sure. No, I'm glad you said that. That's important for me to hear. Yeah, Lindsay and I have talked about that a little bit too. I think I'm also interested in knowing that you said that it sounded like we're saying these plans are good. We tried to take a values neutral approach to those plans, mostly just as a bit of a table setting. I think it's very easy to get into the trope of writing, this is what was, this is what is, this is what we recommend.
Yeah, and it's
Sure.
It could be because there was no executive section to establish the foundation. And then, oh, by the way, this is how we got there. Here's some old stuff. Here's some of the new analysis, the new data. I get that, but I didn't get that maybe just because they're missing that foundational spike, if you will.
I think another way you can think about those I think the old plans, it's tricky Because in some ways, I struggle writing plans to know that what we're trying to do is capture the moment in time and also talk about how we want to move forward. But I do think that there's something worth acknowledging, that there has been planning work that's been done in this area in the past. Maybe another way we could think about it is, as we're writing the text with regards to the table setting information that's describing the situation, maybe we can talk about where there was prior planning work done and just kind of take out the more list-based, this plan talks about this, and just kind of weave it in throughout the narrative.
Yeah, I don't have a preconceived notion of the best way to handle it. I just was an impression, especially on TDRs, because there's two different definitions for TDRs. There's a lot of legal characteristics now that we're a town versus not a town with regards to, and you even say in another section that we're a sending unit. No, we're not a sender. We're never a sender. We were actually a receiver area. I would want to clean that up a fair amount in terms of conversations with, what does it mean? Does it even apply to us anymore because we are a town? Is that legal boundary essentially eliminate all the class 1 TDR definition of county level TDR versus the intra PDU TDRs, which are something another reason why I lean into this is the ability for the Keystone PUD to move units, i.e. transfer development, i.e. TDR kind of stuff, is a key characteristic that we need to understand better what is available, what could be done, and intra and interjurisdictional. And I got to explain that because transfers within Keystone, within the same PDU, I believe by default are still available to the PDUs to do. Whereas it gets very, very interesting in that our largest PDU and most complex one goes across two different towns, or two different jurisdictions, the town and the county. And those characteristics can be a huge driver both in a lot of different places across the whole document. I just wanted to kind of flag that as being something we got to be real careful about and understand better. And what we're getting in the document that's being created, it'll be a foundational piece. So I found it hard to have any conclusions until we have some of the stuff. The most important one was the county has the ability to extinguish or bucket TDRs from their existing land that they bought, that they have not done that yet. And I had no idea how many. The actual present TDR bucket is 6 and small and don't care.
I don't remember reading anything that detailed in the plan. So I guess I'm not,
I think that,
Discussion.
and what's discussed is there's a recommendation around a TDR program.
Okay.
And so TDRs, transfers of development rights.
Right.
And so typically these are tools used by municipalities or counties to concentrate the existing development rights on areas that maybe you want to preserve as open space or natural land or parks land or agricultural land. Actually, the tool mostly started around agricultural land preservation. And then sending those development rights to areas where there's infrastructure and development, and it just feels, like more of a way of concentrating development, built out areas, preserving areas on the outside. I think Peter's definitely getting into the weeds, which I expected. But what I will say about TDRs is it is a very complicated program, especially when a community like Keystone, where so much of your development is within a PUD. Right. You're right that you can't transfer rights within existing PUDs. Where the Keystone Resort PUD, you can work with the county, and I would recommend that if you do establish a TDR program, and it's not just Keystone specific, you work on it in tandem with the county in large part because the county can help also send county land development rights then with you as well into the town. That can get a little bit complicated, but I think working on your TDR program with the county could help alleviate some of the concerns around the existing PUD. It could also be another argument in favor of underlying base zoning districts that are outside of the PUD to be able to establish different types of intended uses and different intended zoning districts within your community to understand where you want to try and concentrate new development, and what types of development, and where you want to be preserving development. And then that could table set a little bit around future sending and receiving areas. But you're also right that the existing boundaries of the Keystone would pretty much all be a receiving area. And if we called it a sending area, that's probably a clerical error. I apologize.
So.
Yeah.
Take a seat further, Lindsay.
Lindsay, go ahead.
So let's start with, I finished up my comments for the draft chapters, the ones we saw today. And while I didn't write danger, 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 I did caution. And we're going to talk more about the issue of mentioning the plans that are currently in effect. Did you see how I just did that? I
Okay.
did not say the Snake River Master Plan, I
Right,
did not
right.
say the countywide master plan, because there was a high degree of reluctance to rely on those documents. There was.
Right.
Now, with that being said, one of my to-do lists will be, I think there are portions of the plans that run parallel to what we're hearing from people that we got responses from. So I personally don't believe all of it is bad. I don't. And I'm gonna take a relook at all the recommendations via the category, the elements, and see, just because it originated there doesn't mean that it's not applicable. Some of it isn't. Absolutely, some of it isn't. Now, TDRs are its own animal. And it is so easy to get lost in them, and it is incredibly complex. With that being said, I think from what my understanding from not only the decision makers, but from the public is, you know what? We haven't reached build out yet. There is remaining density out there, and Jess is doing an amazing job right now of calculating how much is really left from a zoning perspective.
Right.
So say we're 80%. I forget the number right now, but there's remaining density out there right now. Is it appropriate to bring additional density from up there, from over there, from there, down here? I'm not hearing that yet. So we'll consider that. What I am hearing is a degree of reluctance to utilize the county's bank, if you will, to bring density in. Not to say it's not out of the question, but if we have so much density left over, it is now the time to actually bring more in, because there absolutely are impacts associated with bringing more in. Peter, you are correct, sort of, with regards to the bank. The county has acquired a lot of backcountry properties that, by the way, were originally zoned.
But that's not the bank I was referring to.
I know. They've acquired a lot of land. With that land is associated some degree of development rights, yes. They're still there. They're not in a bank yet.
Correct.
The county has an ability to take what they've acquired and strip that density and put it in their bank.
That's what I meant by expiring it.
Too
Yeah,
far.
exactly.
I think it would be incredible. Where people get so confused is that type of density up on the hillside, bringing it to where it potentially could be accommodated, received, with the density left over, not currently utilized in the Keystone Resort PD and maybe elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's a total different bucket.
That is completely.
Totally different.
Unfortunately, they do use the word transfer, and I think that's where the confusion originates.
And that's kind of my point, is simply to make sure that when you define it in here, you're talking about one of the two flavors and not both intermixed. Is actually, thank you for bringing that up because it's summarized a big portion of my comment completely, is that we have a couple of flavors to talk about. We need to make sure those are distinct.
Sure.
And is
Yeah,
there-
I'll
ahead.
maybe just say the reason we even talked about TDRs in the first place was trying to be responsive to community input about, the kind of, let's go back. Right. Basically the balancing the natural environment with, the built
Right.
environment, right? And I think it's one of the better tools on the market for or at least sending that signal to your community that, this is the type of community we are that uses this type of tool. But it is not the only tool, and it is also not the only way to communicate that.
And maybe the idea is that this section be very, very general and simplified.
Re-look at that.
You'll relook at it. I think that would be good.
And garner a little bit more input.
Right, okay, that's good.
And, again, from a clarity standpoint, what I'm trying to do with you also is educate you. When the word transfer is unfortunately used in the Keystone Resort PUD and maybe elsewhere, maybe we help define, I think you use it intra and intra or.
Inter and intra, like interstate commerce and intrastate
I'm more of
commerce.
a simpleton.
I was gonna say, it sounds good.
It sounds too close.
Density from what is currently allowed. But we're definitely gonna take another.
Take another
Yeah,
look. All
sounds
right.
good. Great, that's all
That's all you wanted to say, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people understood there's a couple different
Oh,
characteristics.
absolutely, and thank you. What, the other thing to note is the county's TDR program has been wildly successful with regards to the original intent of taking density off from the backcountry and acquiring it. Amazing job, absolutely tremendous, and I would
They spent a lot of money on
challenge
it.
anyone to dispute that. With that being said, they are moving, because they've been so successful countywide, and very much so in the Upper Blue, but also Snake, with the acquisition of properties. Now they're sort of moving to how to manage it phase from acquiring it. So just a little bit of background there.
Okay. Do you have more things?
Couple of real minor things. I'm a data person. Couple of data points that I would like to have seen in here, maybe I missed it after the third cup of coffee. One is simply stating how many short-term licenses we have today. My understanding is it's about a little over 1,900 of them as of like this week.
Needs assessment.
Yeah, and that'll come in that.
Yeah.
Great, sounds good. The other one is we talk about the PUDs and the complexity, absolutely. You might just mention there's 31 of them, just
Yeah.
another data point that it complete, one of those crazy
Yeah.
things is most
It's a
towns don't
lot.
even have 31 zones total. They have 5 or 10 major ones and that's about it. Now we have 31.
Right.
Yeah.
And the
Keeping me
complexity.
updated, because I brought those points up today.
That sounds good.
The other is you had a question about Keystone Ranch Water Company.
That's the name. I knew it was told me at one point. It's probably by you. too.
The official name in the Colorado database is Keystone Ranch, PWS ID, and I can send you that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
Oh, a
else?
couple of minor things on the current maps. There were a couple items that were a little, oh, no, that one's already been developed. I think it was Brightwood, was on the map as if it's not developed. It is, it just accentuates exactly what you came up with, which is there very little undeveloped land and has been shrinking and still will.
Yeah, we can update that map.
Minor stuff. And I can send that separately.
No problem.
Don't need to click everybody.
Just a reminder,
Send to you.
to me, do not address
I will.
everybody.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
I think we've probably exhausted our comments on, exhausted
Yeah.
No,
Dylan.
this is great.
Yeah,
I'm just, I
Yes.
want to make sure that I flag this because I think you all know this, but I think it's tremendously important. My team, me, we're here to serve you.
no, we appreciate it. You've been great. You've been great. And you know, we love the slides. So today you were really spot on.
Round of
Best
applause.
slides.
I'll make sure to send those slides to Lindsay as well.
Great.
Great material. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and for all your team. And that concludes our agenda for today. Does anyone have anything they want to add? If not, okay. If not, we can, could I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.